Now joined on the line by Devon Dudley to look back on his iconic career in the wrestling entertainment industry. And Devon, just in relation to growing up as a child, in relation to your background, from research I heard you came from a very religious background. Both your parents were a bishop and a pastor, and growing up as a kid, was high school football your first love, I do believe?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, born and raised, and, I basically, in a bad area, and, pro wrestling was basically my outlet. As opposed to running the streets and doing what other people were doing, I decided to be home and watch what the Hogan and Andre era were producing. And so, both my parents being reverends and, having the church, being a pastor's kid, I basically grew up in the church, so that also helped me to get on the right path.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where I basically did what I did in terms of getting out of that, bad area, my parents and I, and moved into a better area. And, as a young kid, I always wanted to do wrestling. Enjoyed wrestling, loved watching it, and always wanted to be a part of it. But football, basically, American football was basically standing in the way of that. And I had a scholarship and was going to go play football, but I decided I didn't love it as much as I loved pro wrestling. And I never wrestled in high school, never did have much of a background, but, again, fell in love with the sport of pro wrestling, and I had made my decision out of high school that was going to be it for me.
Yeah, and you made your decision, and you started off in 1991, and you were trained by a guy called Johnny Rodz, and you competed in various independent promotions. And just tell me about that, just starting off in the wrestling industry at a young age, only, I say, just barely out of your teens in 1991. How did you come to the attention of Johnny, and what was the training like earlier on? Did you have any character or gimmick set up for you in those early days working in the independent promotions?
No, nothing like that. It was, I listened to a talk show back when I was a junior in high school. And I basically listened to a guy who used to give us the insight of pro wrestling. And I basically called in and got through and asked him how to be a pro wrestler. He called me after the show and told me about Johnny Rodz. Johnny Rodz used to work for Vince Sr., Vince McMahon Jr.'s father. And he was pretty much Vince Sr.'s stretch man. So when anybody got out of line, they would put Johnny in the ring with him, and Johnny would, make him right. So I went down, I called him up, and he says, listen, kids, graduate from high school, get your college degree, and then come see me. And so what I did was I graduated from high school, and then I called him up, and I told him I was going to college at the time, and he accepted me in there, and I spent 5.5 years at his wrestling school before I made the move to ECW. He trained guys like Big Dick Dudley, who was part of the Dudley Boys, Tommy Dreamer, Hugh Morris, Taz, helped train Roddy Piper, helped bring S.D. Jones, Special Delivery Jones, into WWE as well. I mean, Johnny Rodz was an incredible trainer, and basically the reason why a lot of guys not only broke into the business, but made it successfully.
Yeah, and Devon, in April the 13th, 1996, you debuted in ECW as Devon Dudley. And just a bit of research says that your character was based on the Samuel Jackson character in Pulp Fiction. And is there any truth to that? And what was it like with Paul Heyman, in your first meetings with Paul Heyman at the start of ECW? What was your take on what the promotion was about?
Basically, I didn't like ECW to the point where I wanted to be involved. It was fun to watch, but I was scared to death of it. When you saw barbed wire bats and tables being lit on fire and the ropes dropped and surrounded with barbed wire, wasn't my idea at the time of pro wrestling. Far away from the Hogan and Andre era, or even the NWA, Ric Flair and Dusty era that I was used to. And so, but Johnny Rods, I went into his office and he said to me, he goes, I trained Dreamer and Taz and all of them. And he says, well, what do you think about ECW?
Yeah.
And at that time, in my head, real quick, I said, well, I would love to go, but inside I was like, no. But I knew that I had to go somewhere if I was going to make it anywhere. And he made the phone call, and, I went down to the ECW dojo and did my tryout there and with Perry Saturn, who was part of the tag team, the Eliminators. And Perry gave the thumbs up, and Taz and Dreamer actually walked in at the time, and they both gave the thumbs up as well. And Taz called Paulie and told him, say, listen, we got a winner.
Yeah.
And I met with Paulie in the office, and I told him a little bit about my background, parents being reverend, and that I was in love with the movie Rocky III.
Yeah.
And he asked me who was my favorite character. And I told him Mr. T.
Yeah.
I said, of course, I wanted Rocky Balboa to win, but Mr. T captivated me like it did so many kids back then when the movie came out. And so I basically continued to talk to him about it, and I actually did an invitation of Mr. T, and he loved it. But then when he found out about my background with my parents, he said, have you ever seen the movie Pulp Fiction?
Yeah.
And I said, no. I said, I've never seen it. And he says, well, I want you to go and go rent it.
Yeah.
Take a look at it. And there's a character by Samuel L. Jackson called Jules. I want you to go and take a look at that and come back to me. I think it's something we can work with. So I watched it. It was the first time I saw it. And, the movie I thought was great.
Yeah.
And I basically came back to him and told him about it. And, that's where it all, came from. He asked me also about, when Mr. T came up, he asked me something else. I think it was about boxing. And I said, I'm a huge fan of Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
So that's where the theory of the way I was in the ring was a combination of Tyson and Mr. T. But the testifying, the talking, and the preaching, of course, that was from Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, and Devon, originally you competed in ECW and you were sort of factioning against the Dudley clan that was already there, and ultimately enough, your first encounters with your long-term colleague and probably one of your best mates at this stage, Bubba Ray Dudley, was actually against him many times, and you can faced off in Ultimate Jeopardy and you beat him there before losing to him at November to Remember. And those sort of early feuds, did you see a sprinkling of a relationship beginning to bond, and do you ever think at that age when you were competing against each other to highlight the main events that a possible tag team could be born?
Well, personally, I don't think either one of us saw it. I knew that they were grooming to look for another Dudley, and at the time it was supposed to be a Rockstafarian Dudley. Before I spoke to Paul, and when he asked me about my hair, I said, well, I don't know about that. I'm kind of losing my hair at a young age, so I don't think I can grow dreadlocks. But it was basically, Bubba was there during my tryout, but Bubba was training at the facility, at the ECW dojo. So we were both young and hungry and wanted to make it in this business, but he was kind of like a young boy, just like I was, and like so many other guys during that era. And when he introduced himself to me, I said, "Oh, okay." I said, "You're the gentleman I might be working with."
Yeah.
And I saw ECW on TV when I used to bounce at the clubs, but I never really got to know the characters that well. And it was only until I came in to ECW was when I finally realized all the Dudley brothers that were united in the company. But I don't think either one of us saw what we saw, what became the Dudleys. I think Paulie saw something, and at the time I was supposed to be the righteous brother that was against all the stuttering and the dancing and ha-ha, happy, feel-good moment. And meanwhile, Bubba and the rest of the clan were basically that happy, feel-good, hey, I want to dance and party and try to talk if I can. And so when I basically went against him, I didn't think that we would tag together. I came in with Axel Rodden.
Yeah.
And I didn't think, at first that would happen. And, Bubba didn't like the direction he was going in. I was actually okay with Axel.
Yeah.
At the time. Because, again, young, I was just eager to wrestle. And to show what I could do.
Yeah.
And Bubba went to Paul and asked him, would he consider putting us together as opposed to fighting against each other?
Yeah.
And I basically, didn't know what to think of it when he told me, because I was basically trying to come into my own.
Yeah.
When it did happen, it was magic. It was something that, I don't think anybody expected. The Dudley boys were not supposed to be taken serious. We were not supposed to be, 24-time World Tag Team Champions. We were supposed to be a ha-ha funny group and then move on to the next thing. But out of all the Dudleys, and I believe there were 9 of us, Bubba and I just seemed to be the ones that clicked.
Yeah.
And was able to take the Dudleys where it needed to be. And then, of course, Spike came in later.
Yeah.
But Spike was his own entity. Spike was his own man. And he basically did a hell of a job when he came in as well. It was very, very fun to work with Spike, and whether we were with him or against him, we always had good matches. And it was one of those things that, I look back on my career and realized how impersonable the Dudley boys were on the wrestling fans, because, to this day, people talk about ECW and how they miss it. People talk about the Attitude Era and how we did what we did with the Hardys, Edge, and Christian. And it was just one of those things where, still to this day, people look at the TLC match that we did at SummerSlam and WrestleMania being still one of the greatest matches of all time, next to so many other great matches that have come before us. So I'm happy and proud that we've had that much of an impact. Working with all the guys that we've been able to work with, Edge and Christian, the Hardys, Too Cool, Rikishi, APA, I mean, the list goes on and on. It was a great time, a great feeling, and, the Attitude, if I'm not mistaken, was predicted to have made more money and more successful than any other era in pro wrestling. And I was very, very happy to be a part of that.
And Devon, before I move on to the WWF and the Attitude Era, just one last thing. You record 8 times you were the champions in ECW, a record 8 times. And just before I move on to the WWF and that time in your career, Paulie Heyman, they say he was an innovator, a promoter, a sort of guy who could come up with these ideas that no one else could create in relation to his head. And how shrewd of a promoter, of an industry man was Paulie Heyman for what he did in his time at ECW?
Paul Heyman saw things in people that other promoters did not see. Paul Heyman was able to connect with talent better than a lot of promoters could. A lot of talent was passed down because promoters didn't feel they had it, or they could do the job that was expected of them. Well, Paul saw things, like I said, in talent that other promoters didn't see, and he was able to bring that out. He was able to work with them. He was able to get them past their fear of not bringing out their talent, and to bring their talent to the forefront. He was able to guide us the way he did. We call him Dr. Frankenstein because he created us. He made us. And, we thank Vince, and we thank, a lot of the other promoters that, a lot of us came from. But Paul Heyman was the guy that created us. And, when no one else was giving us a shot, Paul Heyman did. Not only did he do that, but he did it with a band of misfits. And that's what we like to say, because we were basically the grunge of professional wrestling. The ECW was the Nirvana of pro wrestling. With Nirvana, after the hair bands and all of that of the 1980s came in and, it started, making history with music and this and that and blah, blah, blah. Here comes Nirvana, they come in and they just changed the whole scene. Yeah. They did to rock and roll what no other band has ever done. And they will go down in history. Well, ECW did that. Yeah. ECW, no one can ever deny that ECW did not change the face of pro wrestling. There would not have been an Attitude Era if it wasn't for Paul Heyman's thinking and going extreme, pushing the envelope. People were tired of seeing the, say your prayers, eat your vitamins. And with all due respect to the Hogan and Andre era, it's just that every era sometimes has its time. Yeah. And you got to know when to walk away and to move on with the time. Well, at that point in time, people were tired of it. And, again, all the credit to those guys because they came before us. They basically built an era that brought pro wrestling out of the closet and into the mainstream. Well, ECW took it to that next level where it needed to go. And that's exactly what we did in ECW. We were a family. We were a family that was wanting to be the creators of a new era and to be able to say, hey, we're not just some independent, independent show. We are the real deal. We're going to become the third largest company, if not second or first. We're going to do stuff where we might not last that long, but you're going to remember us and you'll never forget us. And that's exactly what we did. Again, you can't deny that ECW did not change the face of pro wrestling.
Most definitely.
There would not have been a Stone Cold Steve Austin. There would not have been the Mick Foley coming off the cage with Undertaker because no one had ever seen that. Remember, ECW had Mick Foley. ECW had Stone Cold Steve Austin, Rey Mysterio Jr., Dean Malenko, all those guys that were successful during that era. ECW had them first, and ECW brought things out of them. This Stone Cold Steve Austin credits his career in terms of that Stone Cold Steve Austin character to Paul Heyman. Because when WCW let him go and they fired him, he was very, very angry. And Austin said this so many times. He was very angry. He wanted to make a difference. He wanted to get his point across and say how he felt. Paul Heyman gave him that platform to do that. And when Steve had that platform, he took it from there and then brought it to the WWE, and the rest is history.
And Devon, if I can move on now to your time in the WWF and WEE, you debuted in 2000, debuted in 1999 as the Dudley Boys with Bubba, and you embarked in 2000 and 2001 with what I call one of the best tag team, the greatest time in tag team wrestling that I can ever remember, and most people can remember, with the Hardy Boys and Edge and Christian. The first ever triangle ladder match at WrestleMania, in WrestleMania in 2000. Two tables ladder chair matches, first at SummerSlam August 2000 and the second at WrestleMania 17. And but basically, can I ask you about those ladder matches? You were the first ones to take part in them, those triangle ladder matches and the TLC matches, and you see stunts there and you're trying to rehearse and prepare for those sort of events like that, and you see the choreography that goes on in relation to Jeff Hardy jumping off 6-foot ladders and stuff like that. Did you, from your wrestling background before and what you had done in ECW, were you well used to that, or were you prepared to that, or do those tag team matches take it to a new level that you'd never even experienced before in your own wrestling career? And those matches, they set a trend for all sorts of innovation to happen afterwards.
Like I said before, can't deny what ECW did. ECW changed the face of pro wrestling. We did those things in ECW. Okay, WWE was on a bigger platform, okay, where the world saw what was happening and what was going on. So, the TLC matches, the tables, the ladders and chairs, look at all the ECW matches, look at all the weapons that we did in there. But when we had battles with New Jack, not only did we bring in tables, ladders, and chairs, but we brought in the kitchen sink, the vacuum cleaner, you name it, we brought it, and we used it. So the difference between the ECW style of doing it
Yeah.
And again, there was bloodthirsty fans in Philadelphia, and that's what they wanted. Well, with WWE, it's all about storytelling. And what we did was we took those tables, ladders, and chairs, and as opposed to just going in there and just beating the hell out of each other, we told a story.
Yeah.
We not only did we tell a story, but we told an interesting story that kept the people on their feet and basically made them just go, oh my God, what else can they do? Well, we did that with the first one, okay, in SummerSlam, and I'd like to say that the ladder match at WrestleMania 16, I believe it was, that we had the first one, I'd like to say that was a TLC match because we did use all three. It was called a ladder match. But that first one, that was SummerSlam in Carolina, and then people said, well, where can you go after those two? Well, we took it to another level, and we did it at WrestleMania 17.
Yeah.
And not only that, but we added people. We added Rhino. We added Lita to the mix. And, of course, Spike Dudley.
Yeah.
So when you look at it, we got tables, ladders, and chairs. We're telling the story, and we're adding all three of those new elements in it, which now it's like, oh, my God. It's like, what else can you do? It's just when you think we couldn't take it any further, we did.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most amazing things about those TLC matches. We were all on one accord. We wanted to prove that we weren't some fly-by-night guys that were going to be here in WWE and going tomorrow. We wanted to prove that we were the real deal. Look, you had so many people that were in front of us, so many different elements. You had The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mick Foley, Triple H, The Undertaker, Kane. You had Big Show. You had all of these mainstream guys that were just, man, kicking asses and helping to sell out arenas worldwide. We wanted to be a part of that. We wanted to be able to say, hey, we can help you to do that. And that's exactly what we did. So I don't think people expected the TLC matches to come off the way they did.
Yeah.
And we knew that. But we also knew that we believed in ourselves and that we could do it. And that's exactly what we did. Listen, when you got guys that were as hungry as us and guys that want it and willing to put their bodies on the line to do that, so it's like putting a dog in a corner and you're gonna attack him. He's going to come out fighting. That's exactly what we did.
Yeah, and Devon, in March 2002, draft happened and you were sent to SmackDown and Bubba was sent to Raw, and it led to the birth of the Reverend Devon character, and it also, your birth of the Reverend Devon character, many people would say it was the birth of Batista as well, the first time Batista came on the screens, onto viewers, and if it wasn't for the Reverend Devon character, who knows where Batista could have wound up. And can you tell us about that sort of changing your identity, going out as a singles wrestler after that draft, the Reverend Devon character, and first meeting Batista and working under him, and did you know that there was something special in him as well?
I actually didn't want to do the Reverend Devon character, believe it or not. I didn't want to do it. I just wanted to be Devon Dudley.
Okay.
Went to testify and all of that. And I remember when it was approached to me, I had hesitations about it.
Yeah.
But when Vince let me be me and told me that I could pretty much just come up with scripture and use it in the promos, and he would be my spiritual advisor, and we would do promos together. When I remember the first one we did, it wound up being really good, and I remember being nervous because I'm doing promos with Vince.
Yeah.
And we hit a home run with it. And then the second time, we hit another home run with it. We kept hitting home runs, and it was working great.
Yeah.
And then we brought Dave in, and then it was working even better than we expected. But then somewhere along the line, it went south. Somewhere along the line, things changed, and we basically we didn't know why and what caused it to go that way. There were certain people that jumped aboard that were writing for the character. I did not like where they were going with it.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, a character like that, you have to basically, how do I say, you have to do that character in your own words. You can give me a blueprint, but let me put it in my words. I can get across what you need for me to get across, but you can't write it for me. And I think that's where it went south, because you didn't let me be me. You took that away from me. You took that freedom away from me. That's like having someone write word for word the Stone Cold Steve Austin gimmick character. You can't do that. Steve's got to be Steve. Give him the bullet points, and Steve can be Austin. Well, it was the same thing with the Reverend Devon character. And I remember that I expressed myself very, very much about wanting to regain control of that, and I was told no. Yeah. And so that's where the character kind of went south, and it never recuperated after that. I had fun doing it. You know, I remember Paul said to me, he wanted me to go out there with a collection plate, and I said, Paul, what do you want me to do with this? He says, well, I want you to ask for donations. And I said, donations? I said, Paul, no one's going to sit there and give me money. He said, Devon, he goes, if you say this promo the way I know you can say it, and do the things you say you can do, then it'll work. And this is where Dr. Frankenstein, again, was right. Yeah. You know, I went out there, and I did the promo the way only I knew how to do it, and I started asking for donations around the ring, and the basket was overflowing by the time I got to the top of the ramp.
And
it was totally incredible.
And Devon, if I can bring you on now to after the WWF, you came into another organisation that was experiencing liftoff. It was coming to a sort of boom. It was breaking out at the time, TNA, and you came there in 2005 under the new tag team name of Team 3D, under the names of Brother Ray and Brother Devon. And you sort of, it was a division at the time under Dixie Carter that TNA was running well, it was doing well, it was prospering. I know it's had its trouble sometimes now over the last few years, but that time when you came to TNA, did you see something in the organisation that you could say, right, this is going to be able to compete with the big powerhouse that is the WWE? And you had some great feuds there with LAX, with America's Most Wanted and Motor City Machine Guns, and it looked promising, the tag division at that time.
I feel when we signed with TNA, we felt that, yes, this was an organization that can really grow into something. We had the talent, we had the young talent, and we had people that were extremely hungry. The creative direction in which TNA was going in was the right direction. To me, it was only when certain people started taking over that organization is where TNA fell flat. And I know that I was extremely unhappy with certain things about going into the third or fourth year of it, especially when Bubba and I split, because I felt that I was not getting the proper chance of being a singles competitor. Yeah. And I wanted out. I wanted out of my contract. I did not want to be there anymore. I did not like the way things were going. And for a couple of years at that point, a couple of years going into that, I always felt that way about the organization. And then I left. I left, and then I got a phone call that they wanted me to come back, and they wanted me to do the whole aces and eights thing. Yeah. And at that point in time, I said, here's what I want if I do come back. Because at first I said no. I said I want nothing to do with it. I was very bitter about the company and the direction in which it was going. And a lot of people were at that time, because we just felt that even people that were on top, believe it or not, felt that the company was going in a wrong direction. And the powers to be were not listening. And there were certain people in that organization that should not have been in power. And there were certain people in that organization that should not have been able to call the shots. You let wrestling minds call the shots. You let wrestling minds do what they do best. When TNA first happened, that's what was going on. But then as time went on, that wasn't the case. You can't treat a wrestling company like a regular 9-to-5 job.
Yeah.
Okay, it's one thing for, you know, sponsors and people funding the company to do things on their end with their businesses and their company. But you can't do that with a wrestling company. It's just not going to work. And again, I just think it was just bad management and a bad time to have that happen, in which TNA, you know, ultimately just went down the hill. I mean, little by little, it just started falling. At one point, we were starting to gain momentum again, and things were picking up, especially during the whole Aces and Eights thing.
Yeah.
I remember people from WWE texting and calling me and saying, we love what's going on right now. It's great. And you know, that made me happy, because there were people from the competition that was calling and congratulating, you know, the whole storyline on that. And then another new regime comes in and decides that they want to take over the Aces and Eights from the person that created it. Yeah. And it's like, wait a minute, how do you come in and you do that? You know, that's like, you know, the Sons of Anarchy, you know, the creator, I forget his name, but that's like somebody coming in and taking it away from him and saying, okay, but I can do it better. No, you can't. No, you can't. Work with the guy who created the story, and let's just try to do this the right way. But, you know, that didn't happen. And so, I wound up leaving again. And I didn't want to be there anymore. I was done. And then I got called back to do the Hall of Fame, and then they wanted me to help Bubba put Dixie to a table. And I told them no. I told them flat out no, because I had been made so many promises in that company, and then they went back on their word, and I was finished. It was Bubba and Dreamer that actually talked me into coming back. Yeah. Because if they didn't, I would not have come back. But when I did come back, I only came back for I believe 4 to 5 months. Yeah. And then I left. And they wanted me to stay more, and I told them no. I told them I was not taking a chance on coming back, being stuck in a contract, and then being miserable again. I just wasn't going to do it. Yeah, and I suppose, Devon, when you look back on a career, 2 Hall of Fames, most recently Hall of Fame in 2018 in relation to the WWF Hall of Fame in TNA. As you said, you've held 25 major championships throughout your career. 23 or 24 World Tag Team Champions as well. When you look back in it and you look at the Hall of Fame, just for the last minute now, Devon, just your thoughts in relation to this. You look at all the characters down through the years, Honky Tonk Man, Coco Beware, the likes Macho Man, Randy Savage, all those people, and your name is forever in that list with all those people. That must be that's the moment you realise that you said the career has been worthwhile. It has been worthwhile, maybe through all the injuries, through all the concussions, through all the months out recovery and stuff like that. When that moment when you received the Hall of Fame and you're standing there beside your long-term partner, do you think inside you made it feel all worthwhile? Absolutely. You know, again, growing up in Brooklyn, New York, watching the Hogan and Andre era, wanting to be just like those guys. You know, I remember, I was a big Hulk Hogan fan, loved Hogan. And when I got the opportunity to meet him for the first time, I told him, I said, thank you. I said, you're the reason why I didn't go out there and do the things that other people were doing that would get themselves in trouble or even, ultimately being killed. You're the reason why I came home, rushed, and to watch TV to see what you and Piper and Orndorff and Jake and Steamboat and Morocco, all you guys were doing. You mesmerized me every time you were in that ring. It was an honor and a privilege, and I told them, to be standing in the same locker room at the time in TNA, and then to be able, before that, in WWE when he came back for that run in 2002, 2003. When I look back at all of those guys that were in there, these guys I grew up watching and idolizing, and now all of a sudden, over the years, I'm creating history and I'm making it, and now I'm going to be in that same Hall of Fame that they're in. It mind-boggling. Yeah. When I look back and I see some of the guys who come back, like Ted DiBiase, like Hogan, and Michael Hayes, from the Freebirds, and Arn Anderson. All those guys that are in the Hall of Fame that I idolize. Animal from Legion of Doom. Yeah. And I see them, at the Hall of Fame, and sitting down, I'm like, wait a minute, now I'm a part of that class. Yeah. I'm a part of history now. I'm a part of an elite group that is put in to a place where now every young kid and every pro wrestler wants to be a part of and be involved in the WWE Hall of Fame. I mean, to realize the impact that Bubba and I have had over the years, and to be able to say, we did it, when a lot of people didn't think we would. We didn't think we would last. They thought we were a joke, but we turned it all around. The saying is true. Just because somebody doesn't want or think that you should be in the position that you're in, prove them wrong. Dare to dream. And when you dare to dream, you can follow your dreams and continue to do it. Because that's exactly what we did. And regardless of who said no, and we tried to stand in our way, we knocked them down, moved them out the way, and move forward. That's what you have to do when you have a dream. No matter how many hurdles stand in front of you, go out there and captivate and do what you know how to do. And that's entertain. That's what we did. And to know that the impact that the Dudley boys have had still is mind-boggling. Growing up, I heard the word legend with so many guys like Undertaker. The guys before me, Stone Cold Steve Austin, even though Austin was in my era. Andre, Steve-O, legend. And now all of a sudden, people are saying that about the Dudley boys. I still got to pinch myself and ask if it's real. Because to hear that, and now I'm in the same category as some of the greats that have come before me, it's just, again, it's mind-boggling. It's mind-blowing.
Devon Dudley, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you on the airwaves this evening, looking back at what has been an iconic career that's spanned over 3 decades. And it's an absolute pleasure talking to you. I know you're not done. We'll see you on our TV screens. I know you're working on the background, the scenes, and no doubt we're going to see you many times more in the future. Pleasure talking to you, my friend, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavours. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, my friend.